this conversation is with one of my favorite people in the industry. I don't particularly care for him as a human being all that much, but I do like him as an expert in the industry. No, that's not true. I really don't care for him as an expert in the industry either. But we had a slot to fill. No, I'm kidding. So Michael is actually one of the people I respect most in the industry because he understands television in a way that very few people do. He's been working. How long have you been working in the television industry?
25 years.
25 years. There really are very few aspects, seller, buyer, producer, executive, that you haven't had, mostly on the creative side. Is that correct?
Yeah, all
on the creative side. There was an article, I think it was Ad Age last year, that said it called him the genius who produces pure television. And that's really, as someone, I was actually raised by TV. So the fact that there's somebody out there who understands what pure television actually is and can evolve that definition over time is a remarkable thing, because I don't think that there are many who do understand that. So just a quick bit of biography here. Launched the U.S. version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire while at Disney. Tell me if anytime I'm going wrong here. Discovered Jimmy Kimmel. Put him on a show called Win Ben Stein's Money, which was a genius show unto itself, taking an ex-Nixon speechwriter and putting him with a stand-up comedian and creating a game show that...
Although he was just a prop. The whole show was created for Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, right. So, which was kind of a weird science unto itself. Created Watch What Happens Live, created Talking Dead, Talking Bad, produced a documentary that played at the Sundance Film Festival, was shortlisted for an Academy Award called The Tillman Story, and is now one of the foremost commentators on what you call football and I call soccer.
Soccer.
Men in Blazers, which started as a podcast and is now a show on NBC Sports. This is Michael Davies. He created a company called Embassy Row after working at Disney, and is now the CEO of that company and executive producer of all the shows that I just mentioned. So welcome him, please.
Thank you.
So what is pure television? What does that mean?
Well, I didn't write that about myself. And considering I spend about 50% of my time making things that never go on television now, digital is a huge part of what my business has become, and I imagine the careers you're going to have. Much of the work that you produce for screens won't even hit television. We make a show with Jerry Seinfeld called Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which is every television network. Actually, Evan is almost the only television executive who's not called me trying to buy that to turn it into a TV show.
Because it's perfect where it is.
But it's perfect where it is. So it's pure television, but it exists on a digital screen. I think pure television, I don't know what pure television is. I love television. I just flat out love it, and I love producing it. And when I stopped, I came to America first. I attempted to be a professional athlete, and I fortunately realized that I wasn't good enough. And the only thing I could find that would match the adrenaline of playing sport was producing live television. And I love live television, like my first love. And I know some of you are fortunate enough at the colleges you attend to have tremendous, control rooms, access to production equipment, studios. I had none of that at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. But the first time I saw what we call a gallery, what is called a control room here, I literally freaked out. I was much older than any of you when I discovered television, 23, maybe some of you are approaching your sort of early 20s, but I was 23 when I first saw a live television program and attended a taping of a live television program, and that was it for me. There was nothing else I wanted to go and do. And so for me, it started with, I've done every job there is to do in live television. I've worked every job. I was the greatest sandwich maker, coffee maker, tea fetcherer. I knew when to put the little bit of extra brandy in the coffee in the afternoon to keep my boss happy.
Thank you.
I've worked every PA job that exists. Booth PA, moved up to script, second script, first script. AD, front bench, back bench, timing, assistant director. I've multi-camera directed a bit. I'm terrible at it. ended up becoming a writer, going up associate producer, segment producer, senior segment producer. I've done every job. I've done almost every kind of program in the nonfiction family, from reality to game show to big live award show. My company, we do the presidential debates every 4 years. That's the best game show of all. I've done sports, I've done drama, I've done all of it. But what everything sort of comes down to me, I don't really know. For the first time now, we're living in an era, Evan, where we understand what audiences are thinking because we have social media, and audiences can actually talk to us about what's happening when they're watching. But until the advent of social media, we didn't have that. We have Nielsen, which in 20,000 households tries to tell us what the whole country are watching on television without ever talking back to us. So the only thing we really have to go on is gut as producers, and that moment when you are producing something on television, and especially in live TV, when you're in a control room and you're watching it happen, and you just feel that shiver that what you're watching is amazing, and people are freaking out. I'll give you an example. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was this global format. I really was not that interested in game shows. I created Win Ben Stein's Money just as a vehicle for James Kimmel, who I regarded as the most talented person, at that point that I'd ever met in my entire life, and created that show for him. That was the only game show I'd ever done before I saw Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It was called Cash Mountain. It was the worst television pilot I'd ever seen, but there was just something about the idea that I knew could be really good. It then ended up becoming a very hit UK show. I had nothing to do with it except I'd invested in it very early, had the rights in the US, managed to get it on the air in the US with some struggle, but got it there. And we launched it, this is about 15 years ago, we just had the 15th anniversary. We launched it about 15 years ago, and one of the problems is that even when ABC picked it up, they really didn't want anybody to win $1 million. That was not part of their plan. But it immediately became a big hit, and every journalist, all they wanted to know is, when's somebody going to win $1 million? When's somebody going to win it? I didn't want to suddenly ask easy questions to go and do it. But we were getting smarter and smarter contestants coming up to go and do it. And I knew that at some point somebody would just walk in and do it. And about 6 months after we launched, maybe a little less, November 1999, I remember we were on every day. It was stripped at that point in prime time. We would shoot it just down the street at 55th and 9th. And we would shoot it in the evening, then stay up all night editing it, and it would air the night after. But we were on every night for 13 straight days. And at the end of one of these episodes, remember we used to have that, you were little kids when this was on, but there was a thing called the Ring of Fire, the fastest finger, and they would play around, and whoever won that got in. At the end of one of these episodes, this guy who literally, when I'd been briefing the contestants, had just sat there staring at me like this. And he was a tax collector from Connecticut called John Carpenter. And he was, can I say a bad word? He was a but there was something brilliant about him. There was something brilliant about this guy. And he got in that chair, and I went home, and my brother called me and said, how's it all going? And I said, the guy who's got in the seat tonight, I'm pretty sure he's going to win $1 million tomorrow. We got into the studio the next day, and it was one of those moments. It's like the movie Slumdog Millionaire. Almost every question was coming up, and he had some story about how he knew the answer because some weird thing had happened in his life, that he'd been in Paris on that day when that had happened, or he'd read that book in his first year literature class and college, and he just kept on going and going and going. And we got all the way up, and he burnt his 50-50 lifeline, he burnt his Ask the Audience lifeline, and we got to, and it was literally such gripping television. You couldn't, everybody in the control room, and this is in the bowels of ABC on West 66th Street.
And these are jaded. These are
union jaded. And but literally, you could hear a pin drop with these guys. It's like the smell of rat urine in the bowels of ABC. But it's the stage where Kennedy debated Nixon. It's this very historic studio up the street, and we're going through this whole thing, and it's just getting the tension. It's not broadcasting live on television, but you can feel it as you're making it, that it is, oh my God, when this goes out, this is going to be enormous, it's going to be enormous. He gets to the $1 million question, and we ask a question, and I actually do think that it is just by chance, the way that the computer randomly set up the questions, it was a pretty easy $1 million question. But I was very good at reading people, and the second the question got on the screen, and I've got on the monitor in front of me the close-up of the contestant, and I can look in their eyes, and I've got really good at this point of knowing, do they know it, do they not know it? And the question goes up, and I can see he doesn't know it. He just does not know the answer to the question. He's got one lifeline left. He's got phone a friend. Question comes up, and it's about the president who appeared on the 1960s, 70s sketch comedy show Rowan and Martin's Laughing.
I know the answer.
And the question comes up, and he says, I want to phone a friend. And it's like, oh my God, he's going to phone a friend. And this is when $1 million was really $1 million. Nobody had ever thought, it was audacious. The idea to give away $1 million on television was audacious. He phoned a friend, he decided to call his father. And like everybody's like, oh my God. Regis is like, AT&T? Because Regis really did believe that there was an AT&T operator sitting backstage who like put the thing is. He never realized that it wasn't AT&T. Let's call John's father. And we got his father on the line, and there's this pause, and everybody's like, get him, you get him on the line. And the line wasn't working, and then we got it, and we put it through. And he says, Dad. And I, at this point, realize what he's going to do. That he doesn't need help with the question, that he knows the answer to it. And I start freaking out because no one in the world, this show has been on in 25 countries, no one has yet got to the $1 million level, €1 million level, £1 million level, anywhere in the world. This is going to be a clip that goes everywhere around the world. And the one thing I've never thought about is what will Regis say when somebody wins $1 million? Regis, a man I love, is a man of very limited technical ability when it comes to hosting television programs. Regis's great ability is being Regis Philbin. And there is no difference between Regis when he wakes up across Columbus Avenue with joy in the morning and then walks across into the studio at ABC. His talent is he's exactly the same person. Regis doesn't wear an earpiece. There's no way to communicate with him. He can't read the prompter. It's too far away. All I have is a messaging system that goes on the computer in front of him that he may or may not read, may or may not understand, and may or may not say. And I haven't even stopped in the commercial break, which is unlike me because I'm very good at planning, but it was such gripping television, I was kind of lost in it like a viewer. I don't ever even think about writing figuring out what he's going to say. And I have no idea. I've been in America for a very long time, but I didn't really know. In Britain, I would have known the thing for the person to say. I would have taken the most famous line from sports commentary, that sort of winning everything or losing everything moment, and I would give that to Regis as the thing to say. And I want him to say it at the point before he reveals whether he's right or wrong. You know that hold we used to make? Like we used to play the drum roll, we used to hold it, build the tension. And I don't know enough about American sports at this point in my career to know the line. And I suddenly go out, I go across the comms to my producers, to my writers. What is it? What's Regis going to say? He's going to win $1 million, guys. What is Regis going to say? The most famous thing ever said in sports. Silence. Nobody's got anything. My 21-year-old intern from Syracuse, who is sweeping the floor at this point. And until this point, I would have said that the contributions of Dennis McMahon to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire have been minimal at best. He's very good at fetching me beer. That's what I would say is he's really good at. And he's literally sweeping the floor because I think he spilled something in the control room. And he turns around and he just says, oh, the shot heard around the world. The final answer heard all around the world. No, he said the shot heard around the world. And I'm like, that's the start of World War I, Dennis. And he goes, no, it's from so-and-so baseball game, the most famous call in baseball, the shot heard around the world. And I'm like, oh, and I write down, the final answer heard all around the world. Lo and behold, he calls his dad, says, Dad, I don't need your help. I'm just about to win $1 million on television. I still choke up to this day. I've told this story 1,000 times. I choke up to this day because it was a moment of television so perfect. Other people, I've spoken to other producers, Kelly Clarkson when she won American Idol, and the camera just followed her little hand as she fluttered that perfect note at the point that she was going to go and win. It's just a moment of television so perfect, and you've been involved in making it. Most satisfying moment of my career. Type in, Regis reads the screen. He holds the reveal. He does something he's almost never done. Ladies and gentlemen, John Carpenter, the final answer, heard all around the world. You've won $1 million. Bam. Television. That is what every single one of you should aim for. Honestly. And that is pure television.
That is pure television, and it's the convergence of planning and execution and just dumb
planning.
luck. Yeah. And dumb luck.
Yeah.
And I think the secret to, if I may, the secret.
I should say Dennis McMahon is now a producer on The Daily Show, and he's ended up being a really great producer.
The secret to your, so it's great to be lucky. It's great to be smart. It's better to be lucky, and it's fantastic to be both. And I think the key to your career, if I may, is that you have what we would call in the industry a golden gut. Okay? You have this instinctual knowledge that Jimmy Kimmel is a talented guy and we should build a show around him. Back when he was, what, a disc jockey in Los Angeles, and that was the gig.
Yeah. He did sports on K-Rock, and he knew absolutely nothing about sports.
Right. So you have, and it's not to say that everything that's come off your desk has been a runaway success, but you've had a better batting average. You know, batting 300, 3 out of 10 gets you into the Hall of Fame. I think you're probably doing a little bit better than that. So what's the key to having the courage to go after the things that your gut tells you? Because there are so many executives that I know, that we know, who will focus group things to death, overanalyze things to death. Not that there isn't a great point for research to be in there, but the trusting of the gut, the taking the risk, the rolling of the dice, what is the key to having the courage of those convictions in the face of perhaps evidence to the contrary or doubts to the contrary?
It's a great question, and it's something I still think about because I have young people who work for me, and I'm constantly trying to think about how to impart that same level of risk-taking, which I think is really what we're talking about. I mean, one thing I have to say is I've been very, very fortunate to be British in America.
You sound smart.
And I think there is I think I do sound smarter than I am, and I think I'll
agree with that.
I think you get a lot of credit for being British where you wouldn't otherwise get it. If I was from Goose Creek, South Carolina. I could be from Goose Creek, South Carolina. I could just be putting this accent on. Like, you never know. So I think that you get a lot of that. Having said that, I think a lot of people think that British people, like all of us, like grew up going to the palace with the Queen and eating cucumber sandwiches. And I come from nothing. Like, I come from a family where no one has ever worked in show business. My brother was the first person in our family ever to go to college. You know, we really grew up with very little. In London, there was no money in the 1970s, and it was like pretty tough. So I got to America. I fit the classic profile of the early 17th century immigrant to America, of the sort of youngest disinherited son of an English working class family, like trying to figure out how to go and make it. So number one is you've got to make your own luck, and you've got to work really, really hard. Like, there's just no choice. There's no like, hell, you're going to go and get lucky. You just have to work hard. There's no other choice at it. I think secondly, you've got to be hungry, and you've got to remain hungry years after you're no longer hungry. You've just got to act hungry, act hungry, act hungry, act hungry. And I think in terms of creative, if you want a creative career in television, and by the way, there are lots of great careers in television that have nothing to do with the creative, because ultimately everything has to do with the creative. And I regard the people who work in legal and finance and in the physical production and every aspect of our shows as being just as important as the people who do creative. But if you want to be someone who puts your own creative ideas on television, if you want to be somebody who is involved in producing those creative ideas and making them happen, pre-production, production, or post, you better be willing to fail, and you better be willing to stand up and fail and own it and learn from it and go back and go and do it again. You don't bat above 300 by not whiffing a lot sensationally and going back, looking at a swing and seeing what you do better.
Yeah, and I think that's the fear of failure creates stasis at the top of a lot of organizations that I think both of us have worked for over the years. But I actually see a fear of failure in this generation that is surprising. Everybody is striving to be so perfect all the time that whiffing, swinging for the fences, and missing is not an option.
Yeah.
But you learn I think it was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson that said failure is our most important product. And so let me ask you a question. What's the most important failure that you've had, or what's the most important lesson from failure that you've learned?
Well, I don't know. I sort of constantly am reminded. I feel like I'm still learning at 48 years old, 25 years in this business. I still feel like I learn every single day. And it's often I realize a lesson has come that happened a long time ago that I now realize what that lesson was, but I didn't know it at the time. I mean, the fact is that my career, which started pretty well and like moved up pretty well, and I ended up being on the edge of being a president of the ABC television network when I was 31 years old. And it really fell apart because the second show I made with Jimmy Kimmel after Win Ben Stein's Money is I made The Man Show. And that ended my career at ABC immediately because it was seen. I remember there's this awful thing in a room like this, you screen all the pilots to the network, and I'd made this pilot. I was really proud of it. It was funny as all hell, the pilot. It was so good. And we screened it, and literally, it was like the elephants in South Park looking at the screen, blinking. There was not a laugh in the room. And Michael Eisner and Bob Iger, Michael Eisner was the president of Disney at that point, Bob Iger was the president of ABC. They got up on the front row, and they walked out in the middle of the screening. And actually, Bob Iger was so unhappy, he walked back in, looked at me, shook his head, and then walked back out again. And that was, I knew my job was over at ABC. I knew I was done. I was literally, you're going into a creative industry, it's at points pretty brutal. Like, there are going to be moments when, you know, you're either going to make it or you're not. You go higher up that pyramid, it's going to happen. And I was done at ABC. It was at that moment that I knew I had to find a show to leave and go and produce, and that ended up being Millionaire. So that was a huge...
And one would argue that moment was probably the most important moment in your career, no? I mean,
yes.
Like, your biggest success has come since that moment.
Yeah,
not...
and by the way, the other thing I'd say that is really super important is that very early on in my career, and I don't know where this is from, but it must have been a great piece of advice I was given probably by my brother, who's a movie writer, was to just find super, super talented people and surround yourself with the most talented people you think. And Evan, you know, on the show we're working with right now, I think a lot of the things that I've done well is I hire people who I really believe are better than me. We've got a young executive working on the show we're doing together in Hollywood who I do honestly believe, and I think you will honestly believe, is better than me.
Rebecca?
Becca, yeah, she's better than me.
She's amazing.
And so you find brilliant people, so whether it's on-screen talent, producers, executives, you find people who are better than you. But you find super talented people, and I believed in Jimmy and Adam and their producer, Daniel Kellison, so much so early. That is a relationship which continues to this day with all of those guys. And so even though when ABC said no, I was still working for ABC, and I was still realized I had to get out. I got on a plane, flew to New York, sold the idea to Comedy Central while I was still working for ABC.
And the show ran 3 years?
7 years.
7 years.
And
the show ran 7 years.
Yeah, and then got Jimmy the job on ABC in late night that came from that. And you know, and that's the other thing, is I would say that really is an important thing. If you want to have a creative life, if you want to have a creative career, build yourself into a creative world. And that means you've got to be creative people. The one thing that marks creative people is they are open-minded. I imagine if I say to you opera, 95% of you will roll your eyes and think, I'm never going to the opera. But you'd be crazy, because some of the most creative people working in the arts are the people who are designing opera, who are trying to make opera appealing to people of your generation. So some of the best ideas for sets and lighting and costume are actually happening at Lincoln Center.
Yeah, and one would argue the most important cultural thing happening right now in New York City, the center of culture, is the Klinghoffer Opera House right now, which is causing an enormous
controversy. So you have to live a creative life. You've got to find talented people. So whether that's comedy, whether that's film, whether that's documentary, whether that's opera, whether that's music, whether that's art, go outside of your comfort zone. I'll tell you right now, the first thing I do when I interview young people at Embassy Row, we still hire dozens and dozens of young people every year, is the first thing I ask is permission. Give me your cell phone, open up your iTunes, and let's have a look at what you listen to. And the first thing I'm looking for is not the obvious stuff. I'm looking for range. I want the people that listen to everything. And just so I know that they're not gaming me, I go to top 25 most played, and I look at what you're actually listening to. I want range. And I think that's something, I was just speaking to a young woman, one of the ambassadors out front, who told me she was from the Bronx. And the Bronx was a very important thing to me long before I'd ever come to America because of Slick Rick. I was a massive, massive rap music fan when I was in, never judge a book by its cover. I was a big rap music fan when I was in college. The 1987 De La Soul album changed my life. Slick Rick changed my life, and so I was big into rap music, big into classical, big into everything. I just got back. I flew on the red eye last night, Evan. I was in Las Vegas for the World Championships of Professional Bull Riding. I would never have gone to this, but two friends of mine who I really trust said, I beg you, come and see this.
Most exciting 8 seconds in sports.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, if you think anybody, oh, that's a real man, that's a real man. Do you know what a real man is? A real man is a guy who gets on the back of a 2,000-pound bull and tries to hold on for 8 seconds. It is the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen. It is real sport. It is culture. It is America.
It is cowboys.
It is
absolutely.
And every single one of these guys looks like they're out of 1954. Although I was very interested also. You know what they call the girls who are really into cowboys? Buckle bunnies. I love that, buckle bunnies. Anyway, so that was and so to be open-minded in every aspect of your culture, pop culture, that is really important because you will not be a creative person unless you can do that.
Yeah, really quick, I made a documentary about bull riding called Rank a number of years ago. It's a really good documentary. You can see bull riding. Yeah, it's really good. So I could talk to Michael all day, and I probably will. But I want to open it up for questions from anybody from the audience. You can ask. You have him here for 5 more minutes. Here's your opportunity. Anybody?
So many things inspire me. I love great creativity. Just love seeing things that blow me away. So whether they are like beautiful pieces of music or great pieces of art. But I think I'm a people person. I like people. That's sort of why I had to leave Britain. I really do like people and talent, whether it is young producing talent, whether it is on-camera talent, directing talent, that inspires me. That Dennis story is very typical for me because I view, if we bring a production assistant into our company, they are just as part of the creative fabric as anybody else. We recently had a great thing. Grace Helbig, who is a big star on YouTube, she was basically introduced to us by one of our interns. And she's now attached as a producer to the Grace Helbig show, which we're going to be making for E! So I look for people who inspire me, who have great ideas, and who have just the guts to stand by them. So I tend to like art, which is, defiantly what it is, and unapologetic. Always listen more and talk less. And that's, as you can tell, it's one of my problems. And listening isn't just not talking and listening. Listening is like looking and hearing and seeing and feeling and just waiting. I think the largest thing, and I think the most instructive thing I spent 4 years, 3.5 years doing everything I could. I spent periods being unemployed, periods being underpaid, periods being underemployed, sleeping on sofas, doing everything before I got my break when I was 26 years old that really gave me, and by the way, it wasn't a massive break. It wasn't like a overnight. Like my first job, I'd signed a 7-year contract making $40,000 a year. But for me, that was the biggest break of all time, to go and be at Disney and be a manager at development and actually get a chance to go and develop. It's not a race. It's not a sprint. It is a long It is a long haul. It's about building a career. And it's not like the old days. You don't build a career at one place, but you are building a career. And so it's not a sprint. Stop worrying about what other 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds are doing at your point. It doesn't matter. It is meaningless. It's where you are at the end and how you feel when you get out of bed in the morning that really, really matters. I wish I'd invested in Facebook. That's the only other. I think one of the guiding principles, and I think sometimes you have to have principles that you don't necessarily are these principles. I think sometimes in your career you need policies which aren't necessarily true, but you follow them because ultimately you believe that they're going to help you get there. And one of my policies has been, I never allow anybody to use as an excuse that they couldn't convince anybody to make their idea. They couldn't convince anybody to buy their script. They couldn't convince anybody that they had a vision. Part of the job of the creative person is to convince people that you've got it. And the sale, and Evan will tell you, I am a very well-known pitcher of material. I pitch well, almost too well. So guys like Evan think, wow, I just got pitched by Michael Davies. The idea was crap, but he just pitched me really well. So I have to be careful not to do it. But you've got to be able to pitch. If you can't pitch your idea when you get the opportunity, cat amongst the pigeons, you don't stand a chance. And yes, it is subjective, but the business is becoming less subjective because of social media and because of the fact that we are directly tethered to the audience now. You know quantitatively and increasingly qualitatively whether or not people are into what you've got or whether they're not, because you literally feel the audience enjoying it or not enjoying it as it's happening. And I think that's a tremendous resource. I hope it doesn't kill, because sometimes things that are new
take
some time to get used to.
Yeah, but I think I mean, we've seen a couple of shows not catch on at first and then catch up. And that's what the beauty of things like Netflix are,
yeah.
and
Definitely.
things like that. One last question right there.
Yeah,
How do you weed out the noise?
No, it's
basically it's in a world where there's so much information and input. How do you focus and how do you stay concentrated?
Yeah, I think it's all about. I look at it like mining a vein. It's exploration. Is that you need to go down one path and find something which connects you to something else, which connects you to something else, which connects you to something else. You are never going to be an expert in everything. Become an expert in something, learn something, and learn something that's unique to you. And I sort of feel that a lot of the time, it's part of my issues with when education is too specific. It's why I love generalists, And believe me, I think communications as a major, I wish I could have been a communications major. It didn't exist when I was at university. But part of what I'm going to be interested in talking to any of you about at the point you come and interview at Embassy Row is I'm going to ask what's outside your communications degree. I'm going to want to know what you've read. I'm going to want to know what you think of pictures. I'm going to want to know what music you listen to. I'm going to want to know what else you think about. Because you've got to have something to communicate. Communications is the act of communicating. So I want to know what you've got to communicate. And it's got to be there. I think most creative people are a little bit ADD. I don't think that clinically, but I think they've got to be able to jump around from place to place. But there are some amazing painters who literally just want to paint one thing in exactly the same way, and they become obsessive about that. But I think it is mainly they flit around all over the stuff until they find something that just goes, oh, man, that speaks to me. Find the thing that speaks to you. When it speaks to you, you don't have much of a choice but to follow it.
And unfortunately, that's our time. So let's thank Michael for his time.
So here we are, guys. We're at the end of the program, and I want to thank you all. First of all, for you guys staying throughout the whole day. I know it was a long, jam-packed day, but I think it was fabulous. Do you agree? Do you agree that it was a great day? Good. Good. So I want to thank the speakers again and the moderators. I want to thank Evan. This is a man who's running a network, and he spent the whole day here. So thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. I want to thank my student ambassadors. They were the 9 members who were here who helped me actually make this possible. I want to thank Professor Lucy who brought them together. Syracuse, you guys for getting on a bus at 4 a.m. and getting here. Thank you. And remember, we're going to have a couple scholarships announced for next year. So be looking at onedayimmersion.com. I'll have the videos up online, hopefully, Ryan, maybe in 60 days or so. He gave me the thumbs up. So you guys, you are among colleagues. You know, your meetings together could turn into something more meaningful. You know, be kind to each other like they all said. I hope I see you again. Send me an email. Let me know what you think. Evan, do you want to?
Yeah, so a lot of people, Dolly mostly, put in an enormous amount of time to make this day happen. I hope you appreciated it. And if you did, and you liked it, and you had good things to say about it, say it. Use your Twitter feeds, use your Instagram feeds, put out word. This is a really good program where Dolly's going to try to expand it to campuses around the country, maybe one in the Midwest, maybe in the West. So let people know. And, you know, I think there are a lot of great lessons offered here today, but I think the biggest one is begin to find the thing in yourself that you can believe in most and follow that. So have a good night.
Amen, brother.